Cool, free CD-ROM for tutorials. Requires Windows 98 with a Pentium 3 400 megahertz chip, 120 megabytes of RAM, 150 megabytes free hard disk space. Additional requirements for Magic Online, DirectX X 3.0, internet connection 56K or better. Oh, that's the same as today. Oh, hello. You know, Wizards of the Coast has finally done it. They've created a Masters set that is designed not with draft in mind, but with getting quality reprints into player hands, and without an overinflated price tag. No, I'm not talking about Masters 25, but the true Masters set that is a masterstroke of genius, Standard Masters. That's right, we've got Standard Masters, or, as Wizards of the Coast is calling it, Challenger decks. Challenger decks really are the equivalent of Standard Masters, offering players 4 decks that are very closely modeled on successful tournament builds which can be played right out of the box. They do not limit themselves based on the secondary market, giving us playsets of rares and even mythics, all at an affordable MSRP, providing new and returning players an on-ramp to Standard, and giving the most played cards in Standard such a sufficient reprint that prices will go down. Cost of entry will decrease, and everyone can benefit. Truly a home run for Wizards of the Coast. Thank you, newly implemented play design team, for designing these for actual Magic players. And yet, despite all this, as I'm about to discuss, these decks are not for you. Blah, 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 blah. It's not about financial value of the cards within. It's about being able to purchase decks that allow you to sit down and play at Friday Night Magic and put up a reasonable fight. Very few of the old event decks were able to do this. The ones that could sold well, and the ones that could not, which again was most of them, did not sell well. By the end, event decks were so disconnected from what was being played in Standard, so utterly bearing of no resemblance to a properly built deck, that they were hardly selling at all, and that's why they're gone. But having no on-ramp to Standard was a bigger disaster. Without anything to replace event decks, players were left with the newly unveiled Planeswalker decks as the only Standard legal pre-constructed decks available. Since these were essentially intro pack decks with flashy but intentionally non-competitive Planeswalkers stapled on top, new and returning players were left with the question, how the heck am I supposed to put a Standard deck together? That's a question I get asked a lot, and it's also a question that I got to pose to a newly former member of Wizards of the Coast one night at a social gathering. I said, pretend I'm a player who is new and has learned how to play, or perhaps a returning player who has refreshed themselves on those rules, and I want to attend Friday Night Magic or the Standard Showdown, but I don't have a collection. How do I do this? What do I buy? Walk me through the steps. They admitted that they could not. Unless I am okay with losing every match, a Planeswalker deck will not get me there. A Planeswalker deck and 2, even 4 booster packs will not get me there. A bundle will not get me there. So here I am, standing at the counter of my local game store, literally saying, I want to come in and play Magic the Gathering. Show me what to buy. And there's no real answer other than find a deck list and assemble the singles from that deck list, which is quite a lot to put on a newer returning player. And right now, the cheaper Standard decks will still cost you a couple $100. But now, just like with Commander, Wizards of the Coast is releasing pre-constructed decks with the ability to sit down and play right out of the box, in Standard this time, for $29.99. Unlike event decks, which were a weird hodgepodge of mostly 1-2 commons and uncommons and a few dollar rares, never a mythic, the Challenger decks do what Wizards of the Coast has, let's be honest, probably lied to us about for years, which is actually ignore the secondary market. They obviously take the secondary market into account up until this point, but when you look at the Challenger deck lists, you can see that they finally are ignoring it altogether and giving us the cards that we need to play this game. Just a cursory glance at the lists of one of these 4 pre-constructed $29.99 standard decks shows us that Challenger decks understand the errors of event decks. Look at this. 4 Bomat Courier, 4 Toolcraft Exemplar, 4 Scrap Heap Scrounger, 4 Veteran Motorist, 3 DePaula Pilot Exemplar, 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Unlicensed Disintegration, 3 Ether Hubs, playsets of Heart of Kirin, playsets of a Mythic. Why does it have playsets of these Mythics? Why does it have playsets of these rares? Guess why? Because that's what this deck archetype plays. That's what makes the deck competitive. That's what lets you sit down and play it. It's a real deck. Put up a reasonable fight. Yeah, there's room for upgrade, but you can play this right out of the box. Now, upon announcement of these deck lists, we saw financial value was initially through the roof. The Hazared deck was $90, Vehicle Rush $95, Second Sun Control $80, Counter Surge was $85. These prices are from, as of the filming of this video, 10 days ago. And if we compare to what they're at today, we see that Hazared is at $75.67, Vehicle Rush is at $70.18, Second Sun Control $70.13, Counter Surge at $80. Now, I don't want to get into extensive financial analysis here because the decks are not out yet and thus have a lot more fluctuation to go through prior to release. I'll save those details for my actual Is It Worth It to Buy video when these go for sale on April 6th. But it is interesting to look at how prices have changed over the last 10 days. Well, there's been key cards like Chandra, Torch of Defiance, that have taken a huge hit, going from nearly $40 each to now about $20 each. The overall deck value is holding pretty high. Again, there's a full month to go, and I do not doubt these will continue to drop in overall financial value between now and release. But I do feel it is fair to say that these are on par with the Commander precons, both in terms of playability, out of the box, and overall value. But you'll remember that I opened this video by saying these decks aren't for you. And that's the point a lot of people are having trouble grasping. They're not for you. Why? Because you probably already have a standard deck. Many Magic the Gathering players are lamenting that, as the market is wont to do, the cards within these decks are dropping in value to compensate for the $30 MSRP of the Challenger decks. These are going to be sold en masse at Targets and Walmart, so you can expect these to not be a good purchase for getting value when they release. I doubt that they're going to have $80 worth of value in them a month from now. Financially, buying these won't be advantageous by the time that they come out. But that isn't the point. That's not what they were made to do. These aren't a product for you. They are not aiming to give you great bang for your buck. They are not for those of you who already have your fully upgraded energy deck or your playset of Chandras. But instead, these are made for the new or returning player, or the player who isn't currently playing in standard. The person who doesn't have that fully upgraded standard deck, but also doesn't want to spend $300 on singles just to play standard, wants to go to Friday Night Magic nonetheless, wants to play standard at an in-store event or even just with their friends. Now they can do so for just $30 and get a real Magic the Gathering deck. There has to be an entry point to standard, and if it means that Chandra is going to be $20 or even $10 instead of $40, well, that does indeed suck for the MTG finance community, the most vocal opponents of these decks, by the way. But for the rest of us, it means we can buy the cards we need to play the decks we want to play for a hell of a lot cheaper than before. So these Challenger decks really are standard masters. They do what Modern Masters has almost consistently failed to do. Provide the person buying them with the needed reprints for the format that they play, while also lowering prices for those cards significantly for the rest of us buying on the secondary market. And there's a bigger issue here, and that is of F&M and Standard Showdown attendance. You can't play Magic if you don't have Magic cards, but for all of you out there that already have your standard decks, remember, you can't play Magic if you've got no one else to play with. You need people showing up to F&M and Standard Showdowns and the other in-store events in order for those events to fire. And these challenger decks are going to let a lot more people easily and effectively play Standard. It's connected to other things as well. Just as the person who buys a Commander precon then will look to upgrade that precon, buying singles and accessories for their Commander deck, maybe building their own, a second deck after getting hooked on the format, so too will these entry point products mean even more activity in that greater ecosystem of Magic the Gathering. Chandra went from $40 to $20 because there's going to be thousands of new Standard players picking up her precon deck, but that also means there's going to be thousands of new Standard players. They're going to upgrade these. They're going to buy singles from their respective local game stores, maybe getting hooked and looking to build a different Standard deck, or a new one when the next set comes out, or they'll stick around for the 7 o'clock draft after Standard. They're buying card sleeves from those stores and sodas to drink and playing in the in-store league and Commander groups and building up towards formats like Modern. It means a vibrant and healthy Magic ecosystem at all levels, for players and the stores. Everyone wins, except, I suppose, for many in the MTG finance community. You know, those are the people who bought out cards like Chandra as an investment and are often the huge driving force in those cards becoming $40 each. The people who laughingly post pictures of the 30 gushes they snapped up at $1 before the pauper price spike that caused the pauper price spike that they'll now slowly sell off at $9 each. These people are very, very upset about challenger decks. But you know what? When MTG Finance is against a product like this, that right there tells me it's probably really, really good for the average player. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of challenger decks? Do you currently play Standard? And if so, will you still be picking up one of these? Are you going to start playing Standard for the first time because of these decks? Do you think they're a disaster, a bad idea? Am I being too mean to the MTG Finance community? Let me know in the comments below. And this video is brought to you by my and many other people's local game store, Card Kingdom, a brick-and-mortar pillar of this community, as well as the Patreon support of viewers such as you. These are the people that keep Tolarian Community College going and growing strong. So thank you.